Cabinet. First of all, can you please mute or put on silent your or turn off your mobile phones, please? Apologies, Kate. We've got one apology today, haven't we?
Yes, Chairman, we have apologies from Councillor David Walsh, but we also have apologies from lead members, Councillor Byron Quell and Andrew Kirby.
Okay, thank you very much. Declaration of interest. Okay, minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of October. Can I sign those as a true record? Cabinet agreed. Thank you very much. Public participation. We've got one question from Philip Eads. He isn't able to be present and he can't come in online, so it's a written submission which we normally would give a written response. But I think Gary Suttle, who would have answered the question, would like to just add a couple of words to that. Gary?
Thank you, Chair. Did someone want to read the question out, or do you mind if I do? And then I don't. So the question from Philip Eads was, I note from an answer given at Cabinet on the 27th of May 2022 that the Council identified 44,000 non-direct debit council taxpayers in bands A to D who are entitled to the £150 rebate this financial year. How many of these 44,000 have been paid their £150? And what publicity has the Council undertaken to ensure these council taxpayers claim their money? Were all 44,000 written to individually to advise their eligibility for this £150? Now, given the enormous amount of work that Revs and Bens have done on this and a fantastic job, rather than do a written submission, I'd like to make a response now. So thank you. So the response is, the Council paid the £150 rebate to 41,740 non-direct debit customers. The 44,000 quoted was a slightly earlier estimate of how many non-direct debit payers there were with entitlement to the sum at the time. All non-direct debit customers were written to on the 19th of May 2022 to inform that they were potentially entitled to the sum. There was also a social media campaign to encourage applications, Citizens Advice Bureau promoted take-up, and there was also information on the Council's website. So there was enormous efforts made to identify people. Of those contacted, 26,499 made an application and were paid the £150. The 15,241 who did not respond to the letter were awarded the £150 by way of a credit to their council tax account, so they did not lose out on the payment. In each case, where a customer's council tax account was credited, a letter was sent to them on the 15th of September 2022 to confirm this. In total, there have been 120,971 awards of £150, totalling £18,145,650. And on behalf of the Council, I'd like to thank the Revenue and Benefits team for processing this enormous quantity of awards. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. And I think you just demonstrated how appropriate it was for you to respond to the question in that way. We've got a statement from Imogen Davenport. I know she's here. So would you like to make your statement, please?
Hello, can you hear me? Yes, brilliant, thank you. It's a statement in relation to the Wild Woodbury Sang, which I believe you're discussing later. So I'm Imogen Davenport, I work for Dorset Wildlife Trust, and we are extremely grateful for previous funding from both BCP and Dorset Councils through Poole Harbour nutrient mitigation payments that funded the acquisition of 150 hectares of land at Court Farm, Beer Regis, now referred to as Wild Woodbury. We've already in a year seen the results of changed land management that's allowed nature recovery on the site. We have established a monitoring programme that will demonstrate over time the impact of change on soil and water quality. But as well as the benefits for wildlife, water, soil and climate on the site, we aim to develop strong connections with the community and provide open access to those parts of the site closest to Beer Regis. Designation of 12.5 hectares of the land as a suitable alternative natural grazing space alongside the capital and long-term funding being discussed today will enable that. In developing this programme, we've consulted extensively with the community, including attending a village meeting. There was overwhelming support for the project, consultation on the name of the site, regular liaison with parish council, involvement of Beer Regis School, drop-in days attended by 130 residents, and an online consultation. These have all informed the SANG delivery plan we've worked up with Dorset Council and Natural England. We're therefore confident we'll have a high level of local support. As part of the plan, accessibility to the site will be hugely improved from a baseline of the current rights of way, and access for people with limited mobilities will be enabled as far as practicable. The funding will enable creation of a dedicated car parking, though many visitors will be expected to come from the village as well. The entrance to the site, pedestrian and vehicular traffic will be separated through reinstatement of previous pedestrian route, while encouraging healthy lifestyles and good mental and physical health through time spent in nature. We also hope to be able to offer more formal green prescribing at the site in conjunction with health services. Dorset Wildlife Trust has for many years helped inform and strongly support Dorset Heathland planning framework as owners and managers of several heathland sites which are impacted by recreational access. We fully understand and support the need for SANGs, their aims to attract people away from internationally important heathland reserves, where recreational pressures are harmful to protected habitats and species. But at Wild Woodbury, the SANG plans are entirely complementary to and we've delivered in tandem with wildlife recovery plans that are funded from separate sources. We will continue to encourage visitors to support local businesses, including pubs and shop, while developing plans for future use of redundant farm buildings. These are at their early stages, but which will be designed to complement public and community use of the site and SANG area. Finally, just for the avoidance of doubt, the plans have been worked up on the basis that the amount is exclusive of VAT, should VAT found to be chargeable. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We move on now to questions from members. There are none today. So agenda item 6 is the forward plan. The recommendation is for us to note the forward plan. As we all know, these things do change almost on a daily basis sometimes, and I'm aware of some items that will be on the December and January cabinet meetings. But so basically, the recommendation before us this morning is to just note the forward plan, unless anyone's got any comments. I don't see any comments. So we'll move on from there. Yeah, I've got it. I'm not going to mention it. Okay, so I'm aware of a couple of items. Matt Prosser just reminded me I know what they are, but they will, the next iteration of the forward plan will be out fairly soon in the public domain anyway, so I'm quite content with that. So we move on to agenda item 7, which is Q2 financial monitoring report, and I'm going to hand over to Gary Suttle.
Thank you, Chair. Well, good morning. I'm Gary Suttle, the Finance Portfolio Holder. And today I present the second quarter outcome. The forecast for financial performance is set out in 10 of a report. Reveals that at the end of the second quarter, we will have a forecast overspend for the full year of 7.791 million, compared to 6.6 million at the end of quarter one. At the end of quarter one, I stated that quarter two would give us a far greater insight into the likely outcome for the year, but acknowledged that the first quarter was more than anticipated. But also realised that when setting the budget, the unknown variables of inflation in particular would likely show us that additional funding was necessary to support the year, and at the time I considered a supplementary budget may be necessary following quarter two. Since the outcome of quarter one, the finance team have worked with all directorates to contain the trajectory of the current year performance. With this outcome, I'm pleased to show that the rate has been significantly reduced. And with stabilised inflation, albeit higher than we would like, we firmly believe that we will be able to work towards an overall reduction in the overspend by the end of the year. What is most important right now is the budget pressures may not have been reduced, but the rate of spend compared to the 22-23 budget figures has been brought under control. All directorates are working with their finance teams to bring about further reductions and, of course, at the same time, prepare for 23-24. At the end of this quarter, 68% of the transformation tactical programme is now green, with only a minor amount of 7% unlikely to be achieved in year. We're experiencing difficult times in council tax collection, and I must report that this is its lowest rate achieved by this council. Business rates are holding up and compare favourably with the previous year. It has been difficult to enforce collection as the courts have had very limited capacity. However, we are now returning to arrears letters and these appear to be bearing fruit, with a number of inquiries to make arrangements to pay arrears, and more positively, we've collected 6.423 million of arrears from previous financial year. As all the directorates are aware, I'm committed to asking them to reconsider budgets, work within current constraints and come forward with proposals to contain this budget. I am unable to waver on this and ask for the support of Cabinet colleagues and Executive Directors to assist us. Now, this time I'd like to refer to the capital programme, which we're asking for a further review. The actual spend against target is low, there's significant pressures in delivery, and therefore I must state that we'll be asking directorates to review their projects and come back to us with a small number of achievable projects, maybe 2 or 3. I've met the portfolio holder for assets, and working together with Peter Hopkins, we believe that whilst some are achievable, the majority are not. And I wish to put in place a more realistic programme. I would like to thank all the finance team for the commitment to controlling the budget. Without their professionalism, it would be impossible. The budget process for 23-24 commences shortly, and as you know, it's challenging. We'll have a chance of input and look forward to the coming events and working with you to bring about the savings to enable us to set the balanced budget in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you much, Gary. Before I open it up to others in the room, others in Cabinet, can I seek a seconder, please? I think Jill Haynes has got a hand up.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'm pleased to second this report from the Finance Portfolio Holder. I think it shows really clearly that we're starting to get this budget more under control. Still further work to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Before I open it up to general debate with the Cabinet, I can see David Gray's got his hand up. David?
Thank you, Chair. I've got 4 questions, some of them are detailed, if I may. Thank you. My first question is the DSG at risk? We're 15 million over forecast. We signed an agreement with the Education Department for an SVA for 42 million. That relied on us delivering to forecast. So I'd like to be reassured that that we're going to balance it this year, and if so, where are we going to get the 15 million from? Thank you.
I'm looking at Aidan, I think.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Aidan Dunn, Executive Director for Corporate Development. This morning, myself and Teresa Levy and Vic Verma from Children's Services met with the Department for Education to discuss this very matter. So as the paper lays out, we had agreed an overspend of around about 10.4 million as part of the safety valve agreement, and we're clearly exceeding that overspend at the moment, and it's of concern to us and of concern to the Department for Education. The primary reasons for that is, in particular, the whole plan is predicated on building capacity within Dorset to be able to accommodate and support Dorset children within Dorset as opposed to high-cost external placements. And the challenge is we haven't been able to stick to that plan because, frankly, we haven't been able to build the places fast enough for issues that are kind of known nationwide in terms of building capacity. So the Department for Education was sympathetic and have asked us to develop an improvement and recovery plan to share with them towards the end of this month. And they're open to whether we can extend the timescale of the agreement. So it's a matter of, we're still confident that the overspend and the historic debt can be paid off through a combination of our resources and Department for Education, but it might take longer. And that's what the DFE have asked us to describe in more detail.
Thank you. Thank you, Aidan. My second question is about the contingency. I asked a question at the end of Q1. We had an £8 million contingency. That's detailed in 10.6. 6.2 was set aside for the unusual pay award, which left 1.8. I did ask the question whether we were going to materially move any budgets, and you said we would review that at Q2. There's a slightly confusing, in point 11 it says no material movements to budget, but in 13.2 it says the 1.8 is being used. So if it's been used, where is it being used to? If it hasn't been used, is it going to be applied to material budgets? Thank you. I know it's detailed, but it annoys me.
I'll perhaps I'll provide a more detailed response, but in headline terms, as we said, the pay award is costing around about 6.5 million more than we'd anticipated. The other pressure we've experienced in year is around the cost of transport, home to school transport in particular. So we've released additional funding in year from the contingency and put it into the place budget to fund the a short-term spike in fuel prices for home to school transport, because we're at risk of operators handing the contracts back otherwise. So those are the two significant areas, but I can provide a more detailed breakdown if that would help.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that makes sense. Question 3 is about the sundry debt. I note that the adult housing debt over 1 year is £8 million. I just want some reassurance that we are focused, because £8 million is a lot of money, that we are actually focused on recovering some of that.
Other methods of collection. Sorry, you're on. Sorry, apologies. We have been looking at other methods of collection, and as I did detail in my report, half of our problem has been the fact that the courts are not available. But this is more specifically about housing benefits, isn't it? It's not. So a lot of this, I assume, will get written off, unfortunately. Can you just confirm that?
Yes. Yeah, so this is, in terms of the process and the procedural piece, we've got a joint piece of work going on between the finance team and colleagues in adult care and housing. That is pursuing that debt. So obviously we'll pursue as much as we can, but there is, as Gary says, the risk of write-off. We take a balanced judgment on that.
Thank you, Chair. My final question is really sort of something to think about. When Councillor Suttle sort of started his budgeting about 18 months ago, he did I supported it, a sort of bottom-up, everything out of the cupboard, what does it cost us, sort of base figure. My question really is, having done that and everything's on the table, accepting that inflation pays its part, are we perpetually in chasing budgets? Because it does seem that, what I'm concerned about is I've been in organisations that chase budgets rather than deliver services. So it's not really I'm not expecting an answer, it's just something to reflect on. Are teams perpetually chasing cost savings rather than doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is delivering services? And it's not an easy answer, I accept that, and it's like nailing jelly, but it's just something to reflect on for the future.
Well, thank you, David. One of the most important things that's always come from the Leader of Council and through Cabinet is that services will be maintained no matter what. I don't like to think that people spend perpetually all their time thinking about budgets. We did, as you say, rebase, go right back to basics. But I think the fact is that we have to acknowledge, and I've said it many times, that this council is unfortunately underfunded. And that is why we spend so much time lobbying MPs and central government to ensure that we get the money that is necessary. I think I've said in a previous report, my initial estimate was 18 months ago, but we were £20 million behind the curve, which I think is absolutely true. But unfortunately, because of inflation and other factors, that has without any doubt increased. And until such time as there is a new funding formula for councils like ours, it's not just us, it's across the board, we are going to struggle. And if you start the day, and I think I jokingly said it presenting the last budget, I'd particularly like to thank the leader for giving me the job to spend 10p with 9p. But that is the job that we have, and it's for everybody here. We are underfunded, and I think that everybody in this council does a fantastic job in achieving what we achieved to maintain services at that rate of pay. But until we get that funding formula, David, it's always going to be a problem.
Okay, anyway, David, thank you very much for your questions. I thought they were very good, actually. Anybody else before I go back to the Cabinet? Tony Alford.
Thank you. Just a very quick question. It's really on the sort of final sentence of this report, which says we should see an improvement in the financial position by the end of Q3. So is the proposition being put forward that there will be no increase in the deficit? Or in other words, we will spend perhaps as a break-even point with budget or even a favourable variance?
Thank you, Tony, for that question. Right now, we hope that we will be able to do the Q3 and come in very similar to the outcome of Q2. But we are in difficult times, and a lot of that depends on inflation. I also see this morning there's a report that there's an anticipated increase in unemployment, and that certainly wasn't expected. And so nothing can be guaranteed. Aidan has got a fairly accurate crystal ball, and we'll continue to stare into it.
Right, Cabinet colleagues, comments beyond what's already been said this morning on this report? I can't see any. So does any member of the Cabinet disagree with the recommendations set in the report? In that case, in the absence of any disagreement, the recommendations are approved. Thank you very much. Move on to agenda item 8, West Woodbury Suitable Alternative Natural Green Space, or SANG. I know Peter Wharf is going to present this report in the absence of the portfolio holder. Peter.
Thank you, Chairman. As the Chairman says, the portfolio holder that was presenting this report is currently attempting to influence government, so good luck with that up in Westminster. I would point out that I am one of the two councillors in the ward, and Councillor Laura Beddoe is the other councillor, and we both firmly support this particular report. And on a finance note, which probably is worth covering first, the proposal does not require funding outside that which is secured through the Community Infrastructure Levy, which contributes to these sort of projects as and when it is required, and it is a good use of the funding. So, very briefly, I would like to thank Imogen for responding to my request to come and speak in order to give a piece of information and ensure that everybody was clear that Dorset Wildlife Trust was completely and totally in support and behind this particular project. It is absolutely a project that is engaging the local community, and it has engaged Laura and myself. It has engaged the parish council, and on our parish council we have the ex-chairman of Dorset Wildlife Trust, and the report itself refers to Beare Regis fairly frequently. I would just like to make it clear that this affects a much wider area than Beare Regis. It really is the whole of Purbeck, and we expect people to be coming to visit Wild Woodbury from miles and miles away because it is going to be particularly special. So this project will see the creation of a new suitable area of natural green space, otherwise known as a SANG, which will provide 12.5 hectares of open access green space in Beare Regis. It's part of the heathland mitigation strategy for this part of Dorset, and it's referred to in the emerging Purbeck plan, mitigating the impacts from approximately 430 homes. And that means if you build a number of homes, they have to have mitigation, particularly for nitrogen production. This will provide mitigation for 430. It is a really, really green-friendly piece of work that allows us to provide, in some cases, affordable housing, we hope, for people who desperately need it. It is supported by the officers, and it's approved by the Heathland Mitigation Steering Group, which includes Natural England. It offers wider benefits, providing a green hub for the area, and it helps towards health, and particularly it contributes very significantly to climate change objectives in terms of health, mental health, well-being, and we hope that there will be a visitor centre in the area later on, and that will provide information for people visiting so that they can actually understand what it's all about, because it will not just be an area, it'll be wild vegetation, and it will give children and adults, but particularly children, an opportunity to understand the cycle of nature. So I extremely strongly recommend it, and I look for a seconder. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Right, good. Obviously, technology. Seconder, please. I think Ray Bryan.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to second this proposal, and I would add a couple of points that may be of particular interest, not just to the Cabinet, but to the general public. Tomorrow, there are very strong letters going off from both Matt Prosser and myself regarding the portable barbecue situation that we have, and bearing in mind this is all about heathland mitigation. Those letters point out or ask for support from both our own group, but also from the ministers, asking them to look at what legislation can come in to stop the damage being done to the heathlands by wildfires. This is another one that we've got to add to our list to protect. So I'm very enthusiastic on this. I think it's very important going forward. It does have an effect on climate change and our plans for the area of Dorset as a whole. So, as I say, I will be seconding this, but I thought it important to point out that we need to protect the heathland, and both Matt Prosser and myself have sent letters to the various bodies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Before I open up to Cabinet generally, any comments from non-Cabinet colleagues? I don't see any. Okay, so I'll come back to Cabinet. Comments, anyone? So I'll therefore read the usual words. Does any member of the Cabinet disagree with the recommendations in the report? And in that case, in absence of any disagreement, the recommendations are approved. Move on to agenda item 9 now, the Pimper Neighbourhood Plan Review. I think, Laura, you're going to present this in the absence of the portfolio holder.
Yep, thank you, Chair. In the absence of Councillor David Walsh, I'm really pleased to bring this. So the Neighbourhood Plan Review has been subject to independent examination. The examiner has recommended that the Council should make or adopt the plan with the modifications specified in his report. So the recommendations are that Dorset Council makes the Pimpern Neighbourhood Plan Review, which is in Appendix A, part of the statutory development plan for the Pimpern neighbourhood area. And the second recommendation is that the Council offers its congratulations to Pimpern Parish Council and members of the Neighbourhood Plan Group in producing a successful neighbourhood plan review. Now, those are the official recommendations. I'd just like to endorse those and add my thanks on behalf of Cabinet colleagues, because I do know how much work goes into these plans by people who give up their time and their expertise very willingly and freely. So those are the recommendations, Chair. Really, really good news for the area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Can I seek a seconder? Andrew Parry.
Thank you, Chair. Very happy to echo the comments of Councillor Miller and seconding this proposal. It's an excellent piece of work, and my very best wishes to Pimpern.
Right, non-Cabinet colleagues, any comments? I think Sherry wants to say something.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Sherry Jesperson, Hillforts Upper Clarence Ward, which includes the village of Pimpern. And can I just add my thanks and congratulations to the people of Pimpern for this really, really excellent review to their neighbourhood plan. Their first neighbourhood plan was one of the best that I've seen, and they've reviewed it in double quick time, and they've done a really splendid job. Neighbourhood plans, Mr. Chairman, as we know, involve an enormous amount of effort and commitment by local communities. They're their contribution to deciding how their villages should be developed. It's hard, therefore, for villages such as Pimpern to see their neighbourhood plans overridden time and again by planners and by planning committees such as the one which I chair, because we are constrained by the lack of the 5-year housing land supply and the inability to meet the housing delivery test across much of Dorset. This serious constraint on our ability to plan development properly can only get worse with the unavoidable extension to the timetable to our new local plan. So could I ask the leader and the planning portfolio holder, in their discussions with the Department for Levelling Up, to continue to press hard for interim measures to mitigate the impact of the 5-year housing land supply rules on our communities while we work hard to get our new local plan developed? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sherry, and obviously your commitment to a part of your ward. The second of 2 letters that I'd written to Michael Gove following his reappointment as Secretary of State, I'm very pleased that he is back in that role. I had a really good dialogue with him, and there's members in this room and colleague officers who are aware of that dialogue and how positive it was. So I'm very pleased that he's back. I'll send him a letter welcoming him back and mentioned a few things broadly. But as of this morning, I drafted a letter yesterday, it went this morning, seeking some flexibility on the 5-year land supply. So it's gone off this morning. We'll follow it up. I will certainly be looking for some support from Dorset MPs to follow that in. Don't leave it in tray, pick it up and to actually take it into Michael's office and seek some support, sensible support for an approach that I know has been used elsewhere. So the discretion rests with the Secretary of State. So I hope that he'll use that discretionary power and give us a reduction in land supply for that short period of time while we finalise our first local plan. Thank you.
We've got John from the back, John from Sherborne.
John Andrews.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just support Councillor Jesperson in what she's just said? We had an instance in the Northern Area Planning Committee not long ago where I said you'd just as well rip up the neighbourhood plan and stick it in the recycling, because if we're going to ignore these people that have put years behind these plans, it's just an injustice. So I fully support what Councillor Jesperson has just said. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. And I think, as has been said before, the amount of effort that goes into neighbourhood planning is huge. I think we need to respect everyone who gets involved in that, and we need to make best use of neighbourhood plans as we deal with our development management. So hopefully we can get over this short-term turbulence and get on to a more firm footing sooner rather than later. Right, I don't see anybody else. So Cabinet colleagues, proposal been moved and seconded. I don't see any disagreement. In that case, in the absence of any disagreement, the recommendation are approved. We now move on to agenda item 10, which is a recommendation coming from Place and Resource Overview Committee on the 6th of October. Dorset Council 20 mile an hour speed limit, process and guidance. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Ray Bryan.
Thank you, Leader. On this occasion, I'm going to ask my lead member, Councillor Simon Gibson, to brief the Cabinet, and then obviously I will come in at the end as far as the recommendation is concerned. So over to Councillor Gibson.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you for letting me speak to the Cabinet this morning. I'm Councillor Simon Gibson, the lead member for Highways. The 20 mile an hour policy paper in front of Cabinet today has taken somewhat of a long and winding road to get to Cabinet. Prior to my appointment in this role over a year ago, it had been through a panel of members then. Work was done on the policy before heading to the Overview Committee in April. At that committee, it was clear, a cross-party number of members made it clear that they wanted to see additional work done to this paper to widen the scope for what might be possible for 20 miles an hour policy. Councillor Bryan and I undertook at that meeting to go away and consider those concerns, set up a task and finish group, which we did in the summer, to check that the policy struck the right balance. In the task and finish group, a new policy was presented that made some of the changes that the committee asked for, and it was much more warmly received before going back to the committee more recently, where it was approved with a few comments. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to reiterate, if I may, the points I made at the very, very start. We're setting out some of the parameters for what we wanted the policy to achieve. And we said that it must be implementable, it must be affordable, it must be enforceable. Implementable in as much as it needs to take into account the Department for Transport guidance and other critical road safety matters. Affordable, as there is a very limited budget attached to this, as you'll understand. And enforceable, given that we must work with the police to ensure that the policy can be implemented and enforced and not simply ignored. So with all that in mind, the policy does aim to try and increase the number of 20-mile-an-hour zones in Dorset, and it crucially allows more scope for town and parish councils to make their requests if they see that it's something they wish for their area. So the policy, as I see it now, is much more fit for purpose than it was at the time, and I think it strikes a fair balance. And just before I pass back to the Cabinet member, I'd like to place on record my thanks to Councillor Carol Jones and her committee, who've looked at this twice now, and I think it's a classic example of taking a policy to overview, it being considered by the committee, changes being made, and the process working to make it a more rounded policy. Just before I pass back to Ray, Democratic Services reminded me at the start, Kate, that there was one comment from the committee about the 60% threshold for support. It's a technical bit in Appendix B. At the last overview committee, we agreed to make that change. For some reason, the paperwork hasn't quite caught up on that. So the recommendation is as set out, but if Cabinet would be happy to agree to taking on board the comments from the overview committee to remove the 60% threshold and just replace it with the line in the report.
Thank you very much, Simon. Hand back to Ray then. Ray Bryan.
Thank you, Leader. And also thank you, Councillor Gibson, not only for producing a very good report to Cabinet that you've just heard, but also for the work that he has put in on this particular issue. This is I thought climate change was difficult enough, but 20 miles an hour, he's now pushing it hard. I'd like to place on record that prior to Councillor Gibson joining me as lead member, I had Cherry Books, and she did a lot of work on this, so she must be given credit and my thanks for what she did on this. But it does show how long this has been going on. Not that I'm implying that Cherry's getting older, because she's sat behind me and I can feel the wound already. But it has been around for some time. But I'm pleased that it's reached this stage. One thing I would like to make very clear is the final decision is via traffic regulation orders, which is signed off by myself. So I can just point out that the decision is a Dorset Council decision, because it's us that has to deal with the effects of it. As Simon has already pointed out, by introducing a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, you've got to have some enforcement. There's still some way to go to getting the police to agree that this is something that they can deal with. We struggle to enforce the 30s and 40s, so to introduce another one is going to add work to them. And I'm actually meeting with the PCC this afternoon, and one of the things I should be discussing with him is this and how he's going to deal with it. So the recommendations that you've got in front of you are A and B. The important one for me is this will be continually to be reviewed. So we've got it as a review after the first year, so that we can look at it and see what's working and what's not. And that's been my policy right the way through the highways and environment side. Everything we introduce, we review to make sure that it's fit for purpose. So, as I say, those are the recommendations in front of you, and I'm very happy to propose them.
Ray, can I seek a seconder before we go any further? Graham Carr-Jones is seconding. So before we open up to Cabinet, any non-Cabinet colleagues? I've got Brian.
All right. I'm a veteran of this process and probably the most enthusiastic for 20 miles an hour veteran of the whole thing. Can I start just by thanking the two working groups, Councillor Cherry, I've forgotten your other name. Brooks, thank you. Councillor Brooks' committee, Councillor Jones' committees, for listening to me extensively over a long period, and also Councillor Jones for letting me speak at her overview committee on both occasions. There's one other person I'd like to thank, which is Councillor Jesperson, for all her support and encouragement through this process. It has been a long business. While we have made some progress, the principal progress is that we no longer ban A and B roads for 20 miles an hour. I am disappointed in the result. I think we have been too concerned about affordability and enforcement. They're linked, of course, because enforcement, if the police do it, costs money, or if you do it with passive measures, that also costs money. There's a very interesting report that's come out from Edinburgh in the last week or so, where they've had a wide area scheme since 2016 with no enforcement to speak of, and they've cut deaths by a quarter, serious injuries by a third. Substantial. Now, I know Edinburgh is different from Dorset, but nevertheless, I think it's an important indicator. Can I stop? I'll end just by saying that when Cabinet consider this, this is a political issue in its broadest sense, rather than, to my mind, merely a technical issue of what speed limits produces what level of road safety. The point is that if you move to 20 miles an hour, there is one group of people who drive motor vehicles, who on the whole won't like it. Their journeys will take longer. There is a substantial other group of people who are not in cars on the road, who are walking, who are cycling, who are on horseback, and people who are around the road, living in town centres and village centres and residential areas, who will benefit from the policy. It seems to me that when 30 mile an hour became ubiquitous, it was a long time ago, there was much less traffic. Now people are going around in much faster cars and vehicles and bigger ones. And the level of disturbance to that other group of people is much greater. And we ought to be thinking about the balance when we come back to review this in a year's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I wrote balance in all things on here as you were talking, so you finished off with that, so that's fine. Carol.
Thank you, Leader. Carol Jones, Sturminster Newton. I just wanted to thank Jack and his team. I thought Jack was going to go grey at one point. I mean, the poor man. And Simon and Ray, you know, they were fantastic backing the whole thing up. It was a long, challenging process, and Brian became an honorary member of our committee with joy. It was quite a balance. We had those that wanted to turn the whole of Dorset into 20 mile an hour against somebody who suggested that people should just drive to the road and there should be nothing to say what you could drive at. It was just do what you feel is best. So it was a challenge, but we got there in the end. And I think the review in a year will just show really what needs to be tweaked. This will evolve as time goes on. But I hope that the public feel that we listened. My goodness, we had a packed chamber and it was pretty full on. We listened and we did the very best we could. We haven't got a terrific budget on this, but as I said, it will evolve and let's just see what the review shows up in a year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol, and to your committee, by the way. Shane.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Shane Bartlett, Ward Member for Wimborne. At page 113 at 2.1, 2.2, the proposed allocated funding for this is 75k, which I'm not sure that's going to be enough. We'll see how they clamour to actually do this scheme. And you go on to say that the up to the first year, of inflation that we're required to establish a further funding is required, and that the scheme will be reviewed. So just a clarification that review will take place by the Place and Resources Scrutiny Committee. And if I could come back on that answer, please.
We'll pick that up, Ray.
Yes, obviously the team will review what is happening as far as the general result is concerned, and then I would welcome it going to Councillor Bartlett's scrutiny for him to help us make sure that we've got this absolutely right. I would like to pick up on a point that has actually been raised with me, and that is every time we reduce a speed limit, there is a danger, yet to be proven or disproven, that carbon emissions will increase. So I'm caught between two stools. One is with my climate change hat on, and the other is with my highways hat on, but they are both linked on this particular project. And I've actually got a group working on this at the moment to give me some answers, because I think we need to understand that if you slow a 40-ton truck down to 20 miles an hour, when it comes to even the slightest of gradient, the rev counter goes way up as he drops down gears to try and get up that gradient. All of these have to be taken into consideration when we view each particular application. But I just wanted to raise that so that everybody understands there's still quite a lot of work to do on this. But as I say, we're going with what's in front of us, and then we will be reviewing. And as I say, I welcome Councillor Bartlett's committee looking at this, as we always get a very fair hearing from his committee, and I will work with him on this.
Ray. John Andrews.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points of clarity, and then just an observation, really. Signed only speed limits. Signed only speed limits. That means there isn't a TRO. And secondly, moving on from that, on 2.1 costs, lines and signs cost 5k approximately for a cheap scheme. My understanding, a TRO costs more than 5k. Am I wrong? Am I right? I don't know. And finally, Community Speed Watch should be in place for 12 months prior to any scheme being looked at. Does that mean the 12-month period for review is a bit defunct if none of these schemes have started yet? So just asking those questions. Thanks.
Can I refer to Simon Gibson?
Thank you, Leader. Taking those questions in order, the budget of 75k was discussed quite a lot at both of the times at committee. The point for it was it's actually very, very hard to explain ahead of an application coming in what it might cost, because whilst this is setting out some of the framework, each application will be by its very nature different from the others, meaning that it's hard to put a cost on it. Some of the schemes, so a sign-only scheme or a line-only scheme, would be comparatively cheap in comparison to a scheme that would need, for example, traffic calming or changes to the road. So what we're saying is there might be some quick wins here where some signs and some lines could be put in for very low cost. But even the cost of a TRO varies tremendously depending on what is being asked of. It's something we'd like to look at, I think, Ray, in the long term about how we do our TROs. But it's basically just to say that there is no set fee for these things, which is why it's so vague. On the point about the Community Speed Watch, in a lot of cases, this Community Speed Watch is already set up, which means that in areas where the previous policy was too restrictive and they've already got a Community Speed Watch, they might actually be able to progress their applications quite quickly. That said, what we are saying is if you want to make changes to the highway and you want to be considered for a 20 miles an hour policy, but you don't yet have a Community Speed Watch, you need to get going, because we see it as part of trying to prove the need in your community, because the road belongs to not just your community, it belongs to those that pass through it as well. So it's all part of trying to prove the demand, if you like. But I don't think the 12-month thing's a problem because there's lots already underway.
Thank you, John. Good question. I've got Les Fry, and I'm going to let Shane come back because I've only got a second question.
Thank you, Leader. I support this policy as it is at the moment. Is it perfect? Probably not. If you put it to everybody in this chamber and said, could you make a suggestion to it and alter it, everybody would have a go. And where do you start? Where do you stop? Is it perfect? No. We've seen the issue about the funding and the finances and that, and it's obvious that if you bring one in a residential area, it will be a lot simpler to bring in than a big urban rural area. So I'm pleased it's going to come back in the 12 months or so. It's a bit like test driving something. Let's see how it goes and adopt it as it is and review it later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Les. Shane, you had a second question?
Thank you, Chairman. Not so much a second question, more of a request. And thank you, Councillor Brown, for your answer earlier. As I say, I've got a little bit concerned about the budgetary funding that's gone into this project and the review that's going to be done after a year. Could I request, respectfully, that after 6 months, an update report is brought to my scrutiny committee? Not a review, just an update report, so we've got assurance as to how the scheme is going.
I would suggest that we take that point away, Shane, have a conversation outside the chamber on that request. Right. Sherry.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Leader, Sherry Jesperson, Hillforts Wood. I am another veteran of this process and seem to have been discussing this actually since before we were Dorset Council. So, and it has been a long and drawn-out process, and I think that the report that we've got to is much improved. I'm pleased with it. As has been pointed out, there are other things that we would have liked to see in it, but we'll get there. I'm pleased to note that you're taking out the 60%, which is, because that saves me raising it again, because that seems to have slipped in there by mistake. May I make just one observation, though, which might not be popular with my colleagues across the chamber there, the cabinet members. It seems to me this was a different way of making policy. We involved town and parish councillors, and we involved other people who had a well-informed, I don't mean the general public, but we involved other groups of people who had a well-informed interest in this. And that did make it take longer. It made it more contentious. But I do believe we got to better policy as a result of that. And I would like to see us be brave enough to make more policy in this way. When we get better at it, it isn't going to... Look, even as I'm suggesting it, the gods are sending thunderbolts down upon me. The bureaucracy gods. It seems to me that it won't necessarily take us this long. It wasn't, in fact, the involvement of the public that really made it take a long time. It was the fact that we weren't used to making technical policy, and now we are. I think that I would like to see us be brave enough to make more policy involving those people within our communities who have something to contribute, and I hope this is the first of many. Thank you.
I think that was more of a statement than anything else, which we'll leave sitting out there. Right, I don't see anybody else outside the Cabinet. So back to Cabinet, the recommendation has been approved and seconded. I don't see anybody wishing to comment. Does any member of the Cabinet disagree with the recommendations? In that case, in the absence of any disagreement, the recommendations are approved. Thank you very much. Agenda item 11, which is a Dorset Council Priorities update. I know Peter Wolf wants to say a few words about adults. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Chairman. By way of context, I would like to let members know that the senior management team of adults and I had a meeting with the lead members some time ago where we went through the council priorities and identified which related to which areas within adults. There are 10 priorities. By the time we'd finished, we were quite clear that 8 of them directly had an influence in areas to do with adults, and 2 of them had an indirect influence. We were also quite clear that of the 10, quite a few cross-related rather than they were related to just one. So what I'm not going to do, and then there was light, what I'm not going to do is to relate it to individual council priorities, because they all relate to almost everything, and I'd end up with some huge spider diagram which doesn't make sense. But what I'm going to do is spend about 5 minutes talking through the progress we've made in adult social care, because I haven't given an update for quite some time. There will be quite a bit of detail in it, and there will be some figures in it. I ask members not to remember those unless they particularly want to. I will ensure that Democratic Services have a copy of this report, and you will be able to peruse it at your leisure. By all means, ask me questions, but if you want to hold your questions and ask me later, again, that will be equally fine, because I don't want you to feel as though you must ask questions at the end of this, because it is, I'm going to be out 5 minutes, and there is going to be quite a lot of detail in it. So, we've set out before our ambition to help residents of Dorset live, quote, a better life, unquote, which was a major programme we initiated. We're now starting to shape the strategies which show how we intend to do it, and with a particular emphasis on those who need most support. At its heart, we want more of our residents to stay living within their communities, connected to the things and the people who matter to them, and with good early information, advice and support when it can help them. And of course, the right levels, type and quality of care services available when they are needed. And I would make the point that I am going to be talking about our ambitions, and some of these will conflict. That's life. So if somebody asks me a question, isn't that going to conflict with that? My answer will be yes. Now tell me how you can help me, rather than just point out the obvious. We are looking at a potential 7% year-on-year increase in people coming forward in need of care and support. It means we need to continue working with our community partners to intervene earlier where we can, to prevent or delay people needing intensive help or reaching a crisis point. Focused work with all our partners on prevention and reablement will support our individual residents, but also help prevent a call on the wider council budget over the next 3 to 4 years by supporting self-funders in our community. As well as supporting the over 65 years population in Dorset, adult social care also provides services and supports people between the ages of 18 to 65 with complex and enduring needs, which includes 890 people with learning disability, 208 people with mental health conditions, and 329 people with a physical disability. This cohort often have a complex needs requiring 24/7 support and specialist accommodation. Since Cabinet approved the implementation of the new commissioning framework in April 2022, we have built 92 providers registered to deliver care and support for working age adults, of which 50% are new to Dorset Council. This step forward means that we now have new capability, which also includes options to commission services jointly with Health and Children's Services to better support young people approaching 18. And I'd like to give thanks to my Cabinet lead, Jane Somper, who is working on a separate critical project, which is called Help Approaching the 18 and afterwards, to ensure that there is connection between Children's and Adults Directorate. It is worth noting that Directorate have been successful in delivering 9.6 million in savings to date from 2021, with a further 1 million expected by the end of this financial year. We can do this, but as the needs increase, then so does the challenge. The government's reform agenda sets a 10-year vision for support and care in England. This is a significant programme of work, and we will need to adapt and change the way in which we work. Through working as a partner in the integrated care system, as set out in the reform agenda, there is an opportunity to revisit how social care is delivered and how local authorities work with public health and community organisations alongside our multiple wider health partners. We have refreshed our Better Life programme to ensure it meets this agenda alongside delivering improved quality within our financial envelope. The Local Government Association and County Councils Network have recommended a delay to the Secretary of State on the implementation of the charging reforms, and whilst we await confirmation of this, and we still await confirmation of this, we continue to work on the assumption on the assumption other elements of the reform programme will run to plan. Some of the government reforms will significantly drive new demand to the front door of the council. And I'm adding this as a postscript. We're even more uncertain as to what will and won't happen. All I can guarantee is some of it will happen, but we're not sure when. And I expect the overall ambitions not to change, but when they will come, I cannot forecast. Adult social care is working with the system to tackle the ongoing challenges due to high demand still present on hospital discharge and managing high risk in the community with limited care availability and significant cost pressures. Winter plans are being actively worked on with partners to support the deficit in workforce availability and increasing high demand, both immediate and medium term. It is certainly an incredibly challenging time for adult social care, and we're working hard to set a budget for next year that is within the Council's budget requirements. Separate subject, Care Dorset Limited went live on the 3rd of October following a very significant amount of work and a successful transfer of staff and services from Tricura Limited to Care Dorset. Care Dorset will play a significant role in developing our market sufficiency. This will see an increase in our community reablement offer, including additional investment and building stronger links with the voluntary and community sector and technology-enabled care prescribing. We are working with Care Dorset to make a series of interventions to meet market shortfalls and stimulate better quality and options that will provide better outcomes for individuals. Parallel work is also underway with the long-term home care provision, where we are piloting different ways of contracting and introducing greater trusted assessment. As part of building these partnerships with providers, and as a result of the Government Fair Cost of Care exercise, which has been through a variety of our committees, we have supported this move in year through use of reform grant and NHS funding, with providers receiving an uplift to a fairer cost of care rate, which will help to promote business longevity and sensibility. I add that has not solved the problem, and I wouldn't want people to say, so that's not a problem anymore. The Birth to Settled Adult Programme, which I referred to for Jane Somper earlier, is progressing well. The service redesign element is progressing with plans to identify improvements for preparation for adult and a seamless transition, and that's the key thing, seamless transition for our children and older people, and from being a child to being an older person, because the transition is where people can sometimes fall between the holes in the grate. So all of the above has been delivered at a time when the system has been under enormous pressure with increasing health and care needs, acute hospital demand, finite workforce, inflationary pressures, and the cost of living crisis. I could give you lots more examples, but I think you get the message. Our data tells us that over the next 10 years, people aged 65 and over will rise by 23% over the period up to 2032. People aged 85 will increase by 480 people per year. People with a learning disability will rise by 33% by 2032. Dorset reports long-term mental health problems, which is higher than the national average. There are 7,092 people living with dementia in Dorset, and this is likely to increase to 9,000 by 2032. We predict a rise of 38% in the demand for home care by 2032, a 16% increase in the need for short-term community support services. Today, there are 300 people who have been assessed and are waiting for a care response. There are 35 people a week leaving hospitals who require council-funded care. Frequently, those people leaving hospitals, we get little or no notice. A finite workforce is available. Growth in supply is absolutely being outweighed by growth in demand. Pressure in the market with providers carrying large debt, pension and equity issues leads to instability in the provider market. There is a very significant unmet need for accommodation with care, including extra care, recovery and rehabilitation and supported living. This is particularly so related to hospital discharge. To help address the increasing demand, the Directorate have mapped a 10-year plan which brings together transformation, investment and reform. This programme will focus on 4 key pillars, and it will come before full council at some time next year, and follows a long consultation exercise that we have been conducting around the county. So 4 key pillars. 1, ensuring demand is short-term where appropriate, with a successful prevention model at heart to help address the increasing need at our front door and make sure that people have the right information, advice and guidance, and bolster our community support. We will also roll out technology-enabled care, TEC, programme that can help offer solutions to aid care and support to help residents remain independent in their own environments for longer, and it's more friendly and frequently it's cheaper as well. That's a byproduct. Second pillar, we meet needs more sustainably, where we will develop an accommodation with care programme which improves our extra care, supported living and reablement and recovery services. We'll also look to develop the integrated care system, working closely with health and other partners on whole market intervention. And we'll be doing that through our own Health and Wellbeing Board, which I chair, and through the ICB, which the leader sits on, and the ICS, which I sit on. 3, delivering sustainable care at a sustainable cost, where we will deliver the market sustainability plan and fair cost of care exercise to help support the marketplace. We will continue onboarding providers to the Dorset Care Framework and continually review spend on packages in commissioned care across residential and nursing care, supported living, home care, extra care and partner spend to ensure best value for money and the most appropriate service for the residents. 4, assure care and support is quality care, where we will deliver the annual assurance framework, including an inspection regime from the CCQ, Care Quality Commission, CQC, and develop ambitious plans to support getting the right workforce into care. The programme will improve outcomes for the people of Dorset and will help deliver the good quality support and financial sustainability with greater grip and control on spend. We want to deliver a thriving marketplace with greater sufficiency and control, an effective and efficient workforce. A fully integrated ICS with better flow, including those from hospital, improved accommodation with support offer with greater choice for our residents, and effective demand management plans through an enhanced prevention model. Again, I apologise for it being so long, but there's a lot of information there which I've not shared with you completely. We have just finished a programme of consultation, and we hope to have a clear 10-year plan moving forward for adult social care, which we will share and be approved by full council at some time in the new year. I hope you found that useful. You can ask me questions now, or if you like, you can ask me questions later. It's entirely up to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Very comprehensive overview of quite a broad base of services and so on in adults. Any comments from anyone? Any comments from anybody? Andrew?
Chair, I'm sure you'd expect me to endorse everything that Councillor Wolfe has said in respect of the 0 to 25 and birth settled adulthood agenda. It has been one of our stated aims very much in this council to ensure as seamless a journey between the directorates as possible, and I'm delighted at the support that both Councillor Wolfe and I have received from our respective directors and officers in achieving this. I would also want to emphasise, though, of course, is the importance of us forging the strongest of links with our external partner organisations and stakeholders.
Yeah, well said, Andrew. I know the amount of work that's gone into this, so it's very important as well. Anybody else?
Can I make a final comment?
Peter wants to make a final comment. Peter?
It wasn't appropriate at the time, but now is appropriate. I'd like to pay tribute to the staff in adult social care. During the pandemic, there have been some Fridays when they have worked all Friday, or Saturday, or Sunday. If you get a series of hospital discharges, you can't just walk away from it. If you get a queue of ambulances with people in it waiting to go outside, you can't walk away from it. And sometimes there was a time a few weeks ago when the queue of ambulances contained children, which is particularly distressing. So I'd like to thank the Directorate, all of them, because they've all worked really hard. We're really grateful for the efforts they make. I know everybody works hard, but it has, this is my area, so it's up to me to say thank you to them for working. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much for that, Peter. Right. The next item is portfolio holders, lead members updates. I've seen a number of reports coming through. As you know, they end up on the web, so take the opportunity to read them. They're usually quite a good bit of an overview of what's been going on in the previous month, but I'm not aware of any policy stuff being referred to either of the overview committees at the moment, but I'm sure that'll change in due course. Urgent items, there aren't any. And exempt business, there isn't any. So 11:00, whatever it is, 6 or 7, 10. The meeting is closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.